Hey y'all, I was watching a FDX video a few weeks ago, and he spoke about something a pro player said, I think Ulsan. I think it was a wonderful piece of advice. It was something like, when aiming to improve, you should not seek to become stronger so that you can compete and defeat stronger players. You should aim to defeat players who are weaker than you consistently. This type of thinking will guide intermittent players to a better understanding of the game and achieve a higher level of play. It is obviously easier said than done. So how does a Tekken player shift their focus and actually take steps to achieve this? First thing I want to talk about is flowcharts, as understanding what a flowchart is will be crucial to this. When players think about flowcharts, they may think of a sequence of attacks players have had success with in the past. Maybe it consists of move A into move B into move C, where your opponent has limited options and several opportunities to mess up. Flowcharts are valuable at all levels of play, but as we reach higher levels, we don't think of flowcharts as a linear sequence of attacks, but more of a branching set of options. After a block or hit situation, we often have several options we must consider. Let me show you a basic flowchart so I can kind of show you what I'm talking about, right? So Elisa's back one is a good move. It's plus 8 on hit, puts Elisa in crouch, has decent frames on block. Good move to start, developing a not frame trap, but a flowchart with. What moves should you consider? You got while standing 4. This is a frame trap. Can't do anything after this. But you can't just sit there and do while standing 4. You're gonna want like a low to complement it, right? So this is Elisa's full crouch 4, fastest low she has out of crouch. But these moves are not very rewarding. So like, what else can you do? You got full crouch down 1+2, which is like a chunkier low that you can get into chainsaws in, start her offense. It's safer on block than the full crouch 4. You also got, for a mid option, you got while standing 1+2, which you get some reward on hit. Pretty good. Homing, safe, great. And also charge it up, charge up. Very cool. So that's kind of like a simple flowchart. I could just like rotate these options and have a lot of success with this. There are 4 very sensible moves that you would want to use with that one. So I got 4 moves. How do I decide which one to use? Well, at my layer 1, my decision making might look something like while standing 4, maybe like 60% of the time, just because it forces the frame trap, kind of makes everything else work. Maybe I go low like 30% of the time. Maybe I do it while standing 1, the other 10%. Doesn't really matter. It's not really accurate. But the idea is that I'm just keeping it tight with while standing 4 and mixing it up like, every now and then. However, what if I'm noticing that like my opponent always respects the frame trap? He's just always blocking after I do this. Well, what would be the point of me continuing to do this? So maybe going forward, instead of like I'm playing against this guy, maybe instead of doing this all the time, I kind of weigh my chunkier options. I weigh them higher, right? I use them more often and try to get stuff going. Shifting our priority to slower, more rewarding moves based on what our opponent's doing, that's adapting. What if our opponent is constantly getting hit by the frame trap? Well, while standing 4 is fast, but it's not really rewarding. Instead, we could add while standing 2 to, the flowchart. If I'm noticing that he's always getting hit, why not do something more rewarding? yes, this is punishable, but you know, the risk reward is kind of in my favor, right? When building a flowchart, I'm trying to pick sensible moves that make a lot of sense to use. Something like while standing 1-2 is like it makes sense reward and you know frame data wise because it you know it's still a frame trap, but you know the second hit is a high, so I'm essentially inviting my opponent to, like, I'm putting the ball in my opponent's court and letting them, you know, kind of dictate my fate, which is something I don't want to do. So even though this may seem like, you know, a pretty decent option, it doesn't make sense for the flowchart, basically. So we have a simple flowchart for one of our pokes, and I talked about how we can pick, you know, options depending on the situation, depending on who we're fighting and what their tendencies are. And ideally you would have something like this for like all your moves, right? Just have like flowcharts for everything you want to use in neutral, both on hit and on block. And we use the flowcharts to kind of simplify our decision making. We want to be considering enough options to remain unpredictable, but our flowcharts mainly just consist of good moves that we're trying to use at the right time. Okay, so we're trying to use like our character's best moves. Trying to push good buttons at the right time. And two buttons that Elisa has that are really good is while standing, or not while standing, Magic 4. Standing 4, homing 13 frames, counter hit properties, really good, right? Even better than that up to just like giga range, 16 frames, homing, heat engager, just a giga move right here. These are great moves. However, what if I'm playing Tekken and I notice that my opponent is just like not sidestepping at all? The power of moves in this game, they're all kind of roughly the same power level. As a move gets more and more desirable properties added to it, the other properties are made weaker to compensate. And homing is a powerful property. Using homing moves against a player that is never sidestepping means that you're not getting the benefit of this homing property, and these moves are just less likely to be successful. 90% of the time when this hits, it's because my opponent was he was moving sideways. So instead of using these are good moves, but like my opponent's not sidestepping, so I could temporarily remove the homing moves from my vocabulary against opponents that are just reluctant to sidestep, right? And well, I can shift my focus onto moves that become stronger from players that don't sidestep, right? So Elisa has this whole arsenal of moves that, like, at a higher level of play, you just kind of are very reluctant to use because they get sidestepped all the time. You just don't want to throw out, you know, these flying moves to do slide. You don't want to do the slide. You don't want to do the Superman punch. The while running moves. All these moves are they're good moves for the most part, but they are weak to sidestepping. But if I'm playing against an opponent that never sidesteps, well, then these moves become like that much more powerful, right? Another example is, say you do like a hop kick and it gets blocked, and then you do another hop kick, it gets blocked, and they go unpunished. right? You discovered that your opponent has weak punishment. We talked about how moves are balanced around their properties, and being punishable on block is a big one to consider. Punishable moves that go unpunished become disproportionately powerful tools. We can shift our button priority to just like include more hop kicks, include more punishable moves because our opponent isn't punishing them. Some other examples, say my opponent likes to duck jab after, just often. He likes to do it often. Maybe low parry and hop kick become higher priority. My opponent is using just strings, just punishable moves, and I'm sitting here playing, and I might just like let my opponent kill himself. Like if I just don't do anything and just kind of chill out, he'll eventually just kill himself, right? Let's see, like eye crushing counter hit lows. Maybe I shift to doing left eye. Okay. Maybe I shift to doing less highs, more mids, and maybe block more low. Opponent like sidesteps after every interaction. Maybe I do more homing moves. Just adjust what moves you're using in response to like how your opponent is responding and what moves they're using. As you start facing stronger and stronger opponents, your layer 1 is going to constantly be adjusting. Your opponents will have less and less holes in their play. More players will understand things like your frame data and what your good moves are, and will try to play around them. It's important to be searching for weaknesses and tendencies, as this is the fundamental way on how we should improve. Your offense and decision making will become more and more refined just by playing and watching, but it's always important that we are actively observing our opponent and trying to understand them. The thing we don't want is weaker players getting the better of us. When weaker players do get the better of us, and it will happen, it's advised that we shift our training priorities to figure out what it was that was giving us trouble. We've all played against players who continuously do some like mid-screen, neutral skip into a mix-up, and we can't figure out what we're doing wrong. We can watch replays and use practice mode to figure out like what string or like punishment defense we were missing out on. If we're constantly put into like a casino mix-up situation, we can at least be informed on like what our options are, and maybe even aim to prevent it from happening in the first place. Ideally, we can pick up something so the same thing doesn't happen again next time. While we should be looking for holes in our opponent's play, we should actively be aiming to patch up the holes in our own play. Okay, how do we observe our opponents while still trying to apply our own game plan and win the round? We can do so by often just putting our game plan on hold, right? And playing more patiently. It can be beneficial to allow our opponent to breathe and invite them to reveal parts of their game plan and tendencies, while simultaneously inviting them to mess up. We spoke earlier about proactive options after back 1 on hit, but there are a whole bunch of like patient options I can do. I can do this and do nothing. I can like sidestep block, I can backdash, I can forward dash block. Each one of our like proactive options has its own like risk, reward, and opportunity costs associated to them, but oftentimes forfeiting a frame advantage in exchange for like movement could like get you a positional advantage. Maybe I like get off the wall a little bit. I invite my opponent to reveal their tendencies, right? I put ideas into my opponent's head that like, oh, maybe I should be doing a homing move instead. Or, it also makes my offense just less predictable. Maybe I generate a whiff And typically, you know, if you're at a frame advantage and you move, that's a pretty safe option too. Just kind of usually less risk associated with that. And it's notable that there are moves in the game that are used to counter proactive play. You know, you got power crush moves, you got rage arts, reversals, evasive panic moves like Matterhorn and this move. Playing more patiently naturally reduces the effectiveness of these options and allows you to potentially cash out on even more damage than you would have gotten by just like applying mix-ups. Tekken 8 rewards proactive play. Oftentimes, rounds are won by constantly running offense and denying your opponent the chance to breathe. It's up to the player's discretion how much patient play they're willing to implement into their layer 1, but I suspect that players who choose to ignore patient play and just decide to constantly run their offense with little thought about like what their opponent is doing, they're doomed to eventually plateau with no clear way of improving. They will eventually end up getting matched with stronger opponents who have, you know, just as strong like flowcharts, just a strong offense, but they also see like the bigger picture. They will consistently lose to weaker opponents just doing strings and whatever, and will end up with a lot of backed up lab homework that they will eventually need to address. Patient play, while oftentimes detrimental to your round-to-round success, is essential to give yourself time to observe and absorb what's going on. Players need to be smart about when they decide to shift gears and teeter-totter between running their game plan while also giving themselves the opportunity to understand. The long-term result is that your gameplay implements both proactive and patient play in a way that appears both calculating and oppressive simultaneously. This idea of reducing your move vocabulary, creating opportunity to observe your opponent, and adapting to use more favorable moves against your opponent is almost guaranteed to make you a stronger player over time. The argument could easily be made that this is not the most effective way to climb ranks. Refining your character's offense and figuring out the most effective way to run over your opponents will be the path of least resistance and improving your overall win rate. Doing so, however, will lead to being underdeveloped in many aspects of the game, and will lead to lopsided matches, unnecessary frustration, because you will lack the fundamental knowledge to understand what's going on and how you could be adapting. If you're a player who has played this way up to this point, it's not too late to start slowly implementing these ideas. It's not easy. Tekken is a hard game, but I hope this helped put somebody on the path to playing a more like interactive, rewarding, and enjoyable Tekken 8.